Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for joining our Conversations broadcast. This is the first broadcast of several conversations, and this one is entitled Self-Care in the Midst of Chaos, which is sponsored by LGBT faith leaders of African descent, affectionately known as FLoAD. FLoAD is an interfaith nonprofit that affirms and makes space for Brown and Black LGBTQIA plus persons, providing a safe space as well as community. I'm going to ask everybody that is joining us today to take a moment and hit like and share on your social media platform. Our panelists today are Dr. Zimmerman and Reverend Rodney Hughes, and I, Ryan Hill, am the moderator. I'm going to take a moment to introduce you to our panelists by reading an excerpt of their bios. First, Dr. Zimmerman is a native of Brooklyn, New York. She ministers and advocates for those living with HIV/AIDS. For 8 years, she has educated clergy and community residents to meet the challenges of those living with, affected by, and at risk for HIV/AIDS. Dr. Zimmerman currently serves as Bishop of Ministers Training and Development for Love Alive International Ministers Alliance, as well as Vice Prelate of the End Time Ministry Churches. Let's welcome Dr. Zimmerman. We also have our second panelist, Reverend Rodney Hughes. Reverend Hughes has an MA in interreligious engagement, and he is an interdisciplinary minister and Reiki master. He is currently pursuing a PhD in cultural anthropology with a focus on diaspora, spirituality, and healing traditions. And lastly, I'm a member of FLoAD, which I started as an intern, and I loved it so much that I stayed after I graduated last year. So I'd just like to welcome our esteemed panelists, and I'd like to welcome our attendees. So before we start with the questions, I would like for Dr. Zimmerman to introduce yourself. If there's a short statement that you'd like to make before we get started, and followed by Reverend Hughes. Please introduce yourself to the attendees.
I'm Dr. Paulette Zimmerman. I am an executive administrator at the AIDS Center of Queens County, where I've been for 17 years. And I'm just delighted to be here this evening, and I'm looking forward to whatever we're going to do for our audience.
And Reverend Hughes.
I'm Rodney Hughes. I am the founder and director of Institute Therapeutae, where we look at economic development from a spiritual perspective. And I'm just very glad to be with you guys this evening.
We're so glad to have you both. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the first question. So the years 2020 and 2021 presented numerous challenges for the systemically oppressed, starting with the dangerous political atmosphere that targeted many of us. The summer of 2020 presented social movements around Black lives. Additionally, all of this occurred during a global pandemic, which actually changed the way we work, the way we live, and socialize on a daily basis. Like many of you who attend today, I have experienced significant loss, many deaths, uncertainty, and other events that actually challenged my mental, physical, and spiritual health. So I pose these questions to our two panelists. As African descended folks, we live the "it takes a village" philosophy. What is your definition of self-care And what does self-care mean to you? And we'll start with Dr. Zimmerman.
Well, for me, self-care was basically an opportunity to do an introspective study, to find out where my strengths and weaknesses are, and to determine where I'm going in terms of my spiritual life. I think that the pandemic had the greatest impact on my spiritual life because I found myself no longer able to go to a church building, learning new technology with Zoom and various webinars. So I began to wonder, what would my new norm? What would I be looking for week to week? How would I address other parishioners, family members? I, of course, experienced loss, even loss in my personal family, loss of my sister. And so it has been an opportunity for me to find strength from the people that I know, to interact with the people that I know professionally, but most of all, to get that spiritual encounter so that I can be stronger and better in terms of assisting other people who are also suffering during this pandemic.
Fantastic. And Rodney?
Well, for me, during the pandemic, self-care has taken on a few different iterations. One, during the pandemic, I just found out that I was going to be going back to school to work on my PhD, which meant leaving my partner in New York and coming to Louisiana. And one of the things that I found during the pandemic is that I know that this was something that started to happen with me when I was in the seminary, is that I knew that I needed to always be near nature. And there was something inside of me calling me to always return to nature when I would be feeling completely overwhelmed. This voice came to me and just said to me, you need to be in nature. You need to be lying in the grass. You need to be among the trees. And so by doing that, I was able to bring myself to a place of balance and to really listen to the divine speak to me in ways. And the divine was saying to me, just be still and see me work in this time. And for me, that balance came with really reconnecting to nature.
That's amazing. It sounds like both of you are saying that self-care for you refreshes you and prepares you, strengthens you to move forward in whatever path unfolds in front of you. So next, why do you think self-care is important for our collective people, specifically those living at the intersection of multiple identities and multiple oppressions? We'll start with you, Rodney.
Self-care is so important because we have been encroached upon from many directions. We deal with social injustices. We're dealing with the pandemic on top of those injustices that we have suffered and that we have endured for generations. So self-care becomes paramount in survival, in our survival within the systems that we live in. And so for me, I always find that finding the simple things when it comes to self-care, like really as simple as preparing a meal for your family and preparing a meal for those people that you love and sitting down and breaking bread together. Those are the kind of the simple things that we do, that I do, that I try to do to create and to maintain that balance. But self-care is so important to us as a community because we have been encroached upon from so many directions. And if we don't really take care of ourselves spiritually, and also in other ways creatively, then, we cannot survive, continue to be survivors.
Dr. Zimmerman?
I really love the word survivor, because I feel like I am a survivor during this pandemic period. Of course, we keep saying the word unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this before, but in the course of going through this past year, one of the things that has blessed me is a new relationship with God. Hearing that still small voice. We teach in counseling, hearing with the third ear, the things that are not said, but you can feel them internally. You can feel them in the spirit. So I find that I have more time for prayer. I have more time to read my Bible. I was always so busy running here and running there. But this pandemic has taught me now you have time for, as Brother Rodney said, the simple things, the important things, family relationships, interacting with other people outside of my faith, coming to work, and just sort of discussing some of the things that we are all going through at this time has just been so important to me. I feel brand new as a result of the pandemic.
So survival seems to be was a reoccurring theme with you both. And I will say, once the pandemic hit, or right as it was emerging in New York City, I decided to leave, as I live by myself and I'm not a native New Yorker. And I survived by staying with my family for a few months. And I was one who felt a sense of renewal and peace in visiting nature in my parents' home. That became an integral part of my survival. And having my family there also was very, very uplifting, particularly because I don't have a large community in New York City. So that definitely, survival is definitely the word that I would use. And I feel like survival has been something I have struggled with since returning back to New York, but we can talk about some of that a little bit later. So we talked about self-care, why self-care is important to you both, and some methodologies that you've employed. However, I want to kind of shift and talk about integrative self-care. But before we do, if there are any questions in the chat room, I'd like to address some of those questions if anyone has questions for our esteemed panelists today. Sue, are there any questions from the chat room? Okay, Sue says that there are no questions as of yet. So integrative self-care, and I'll define it before we talk about it. As defined by University of Arizona's iHelp, integrative self-care is a healing-oriented, philosophical, whole person approach to life that individuals, families, and communities practice to optimize their mind, body, spiritual, and social aspects of health and well-being. So it incorporates multiple modalities. So I wanted to know if you all practice integrative self-care. And let's go ahead and start there.
When I think about integrative self-care, the two things that automatically come up for me is laughter and dance. To be with the people that you love, and I know that we've been very isolated during this pandemic. We haven't been able to really be in person with the people that are our friends and our family, but Zoom has really played a major role in us keeping, contact with the people that we love and the people that we care about in our family and in our friends and in our greater community. But what I think about really is just laughter, is just getting on a Zoom call and just, shooting the breeze with each other and just laughing. And if you can in your home, movement. I think that movement is a way to bring us in that mode of survival. I remember being very young and being in high school, going into my young adulthood. And I suffered a great deal from depression as a young man. And one of the things that I realized was so important for me, particularly for a type of person who lives in their head a lot, is to embody yourself. Movement with the body is very important, because what it does is that it connects the mind and the body. And so I just think that movement is one of the most rudimentary things that we can do to be able to have, it's a very simple, rudimentary, integrative way of dealing with balance.
I love that you said you started with laughter. It said that laughter is good for the soul. So I immediately went and said, that's a wonderful way to calm your mind. It's a wonderful to kind of shift where your mind is located, the mind location, and then to dance, to work it out of the body. So definitely. And Dr. Zimmerman.
I like balance and I like relationship, because I have found that during the pandemic, we have been so isolated. We had friends, we used to go out to lunch, go out to dinner, to go to a movie perhaps. And now, after everything was closed, we had to find an alternative method to get in that relationship piece. I thank God for a mate who has been so wonderful in terms of relationship and fill in those little pieces that seem to be missing. That's why I like whole person, because there's so much to us as individuals in humanity. And that whole person, what are you looking for? What is your mindset? What is your level of spirituality? Where are you going? What do you want to do? What do you want to be? And these are questions that you ask yourself when you're dealing with relationship. Where am I going? And also, what is the new norm for us now? After all of this is over, what will we look like as people? What will be our external view? If you see me, what can you expect from me after 10 months of being in my house?
Thank you. I love that you talked about relationship, but I have a question. For someone like me who lives by himself, and while I did have a larger community while in the grad school, I'm kind of isolated in my borough. And so I don't live with anyone, and I'm kind of zoomed out. Does either one of you have any recommendations? Since you talked about relationship and laughter and connection, what are some ways that we can do it, or our participants, our attendees, what can they do if they're isolated, particularly because LGBTQIA plus folks, trans folks, are really, really isolated. People are reaching out in many different areas. So,
Well, I would say, in terms of relationship, I would believe that I'm very blessed in that way, because my partner and I have been together now almost 21 years. And so during the pandemic, we had each other to dance and to laugh with and to cook for, and to sneak out in the little space in the backyard just to get a little bit of air. And in that way, I'm very blessed. But what I would suggest for people who find themselves a little bit more isolated, like now I'm not in New York, I'm away from my partner, and I'm living in Louisiana in grad school. So I'm much more isolated. I'm in a new city. I have some colleagues that I've met from my first semester being in the graduate PhD program. But for the most part, I spend a lot of time alone. But what I try to do, though, is to reach out to my friends, to reach out to my partner every day, if it's not just texting, or if it's just Zooming or some type of FaceTime, just to make sure that you're making that human connection. I think that's really, really important to our mental health, is to have that human connection on a daily basis. And don't let 2 or 3 days go by without having some type of connection with family, with a friend, with a colleague, to just just have that camaraderie for a moment. I think that's so important in maintaining the balance during this time.
So it sounds like you're leveraging for people who are isolated, leverage technology to the best of your ability to remain connected to your community and family friends at large.
Absolutely. I mean, we're a texting society now. That's a new norm, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm texting a lot.
Yes.
I'm texting a lot. I'm texting every day. I'm texting all throughout the day, and then at times, like even Ryan, you and I held each other up when we were
Yeah.
in the seminary together. So a lot of times you just pop on the phone and say on the Facebook Messenger and say, I just need to talk to Rodney right now. So it's those moments that really keep us so connected and also keep us grounded, and it prevents us from being so isolated, that we're not able to maintain that balance in our lives. So I think that's really important. That's like a really small little place that we can start to have some normalcy in our lives.
Yes. Yes.
And I think we can always reach back to the person we call our bestie, that one friend that's been with you for what seems like a lifetime. You can call them. They've been with you since you were in grade school. Now we say grad school. So there's
Right.
always that person that you can call. And there again, we come up with relationship. We have fellowship. So we can call and say, listen, I'm just going through today. I'm just not myself. What can you say to help me along? And Bestie really knows you. So Bestie will say something that's amusing. And before you know it, you say, I don't feel as lonely as I thought I was.
Right.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you. That is amazing for those of us who have besties. We are definitely fortunate, blessed, to be in this privileged position. So before we move on to the next questions, we have some questions from the attendees. So Sue, can you send us the questions? Okay, so the first question comes from Dr. Wilhelmina Perry. Can you both see it? If not, I'll just read it out loud. Everybody can see it? Okay. So I'll ask it for her. What do you think will be the impact of our not having time to grieve individually for some and collectively for the many, many losses that we are experiencing?
Dr. Zimmerman, would you like to go?
Yes. Because this has been a personal thing for me as a spiritual leader, losing a number of my pastor friends and the mates of pastor friends, plus the recent loss of my sister. I understand the impact of not having time to grieve. I'm currently grieving. So I can say from a personal note, it's very difficult because at times you have to almost pretend. And I hate to use the word pretend, but I'm using it in this sense that you have to almost pretend that the person is still there. Because once again, we reflect on that word survival. Some days you just get up and your heart just aches and the person is gone, but life goes on. And we're also not talking about losing one or two people. We're talking about so many people who were close to us. I had one friend, I spoke to him 1 week, and 2 weeks later he was gone. And it was very hard for me to adjust to the loss because we had been friends so long. So I say it has a tremendous impact on us. And for that reason, it will take a long time for many of us. And I put myself in that package as well. It will take a long time for us to heal because we're not in a framework where we can heal because we have to keep going day after day.
Yes. And I would add that because we're still in the pandemic and lives are still being lost, I would say that I've been fortunate that I have not lost any family members or very, very dear friends, but I did lose a prominent colleague within the Bedford-Stuyvesant community. Lloyd Porter passed away with COVID, and it made me realize how important it is for us to be able to mourn those who passed. I don't know how we did it, but the community was able to come together and just create a social distanced march. So that was a collective way that the community could gather and really deal with the grief that comes from losing such an important person to many of our lives. Many of us in that community who have been business owners and who have been like thought leaders in terms of business and community development. Lloyd was kind of that person who was he was like a kind of a leader for all of us, and helped all of us in some way, whether it be personal or if it was in a business perspective. So what we did is that we gathered as a community. I don't think that we're going to be able to get out of this pandemic without actually having multiple national days of mourning to get past all the loss that we've experienced in this last 10 months. It's just been an incredible amount of loss. And I think we have to find ways that we can do individually, but we are going to have to do this thing as a community and as a nation, I believe.
So that leads me, I
could
love
just add that word community, how important community is. I'm removed from my church community and my family. I live in an area where I'm not close to any of my family members, and community is so important. Sometimes just a walk to the supermarket is your community, because that's all that you have at that time.
It's so true, Dr. Zimmerman.
That's very important that you asked the question that was asked about what's the effect. Personally, I've had some significant losses. I lost my brother at the beginning of the pandemic, and coming from an apostolic Pentecostal tradition, the celebration, the funeral is kind of like this tremendous send off. So it marks the occasion, it marks the importance of that person to the community. It marks the importance, specifically as Black folk who are not always celebrated in life. That is a send-off. And so I find that not only him, but with spiritual leaders, with other prominent figures in the community, we had limited persons at his funeral. I mean, there were only, I believe, 8 were allowed, and we couldn't have it at the church. And so do you recommend, we speak about having collective days of national mourning, but are there any rituals? How do we, because we still have to start the healing process, the self-care process now, today. Are there any other things like rituals? What else can we do? Should we implement like consistent conversations about the deceased? What do you all recommend as to start the healing process individually, but also collectively? Because it still doesn't, like you said, it doesn't feel real, but we're dealing with the pain and need to move beyond the pain.
Well, I think ritual is very important.
Well, I think in a transparent moment that I have, I'm saying it's a transparent moment for me because I haven't reached healing yet. The loss is still so recent. So I'm really depending on people that are close to me to give me a kind word, or, even just today I was sending out the acknowledgement cards and was sort of like pulling the skin off the wound again, because I relived the whole episode. But I like what you said about now we can't have the celebrations. And I certainly miss that, because in the apostolic persuasion, homegoing service is a great, great celebration. So now to have 6 people in a funeral home and a bouquet of flowers, not even a full casket spray, but a bouquet of flowers, it takes away from the celebration, and it lets you know that there's a major void even in our spirituality because we cannot say goodbye.
And Rodney, did you want to finish your statement, your previous statement?
Well, I just say that I think ritual is really important when you're dealing with death and the loss of those people who are near to you. And some of the things that I've done in the past is just to, I think we as African people, when we acknowledge that we have our ancestors around us, because I actually live with the philosophy that death is a removal of the body, but the person's spirit still remains around you. And you have the ability to really reach out and commune and talk with these people. That doesn't take away from the fact that we have to mourn the physical loss, because the physical loss, it could be like a part of you is being ripped away from you. But I do believe what helped me to deal with the loss of people who have been very, very close to me was to think about the times that we've had together, but also to do little rituals like light candles, to acknowledge their presence there, and really to talk to them and really allow that spirituality that connects all of us, that is always ever present around us, is to be able to just use that. Those are gifts that we have being spiritual people, that we know that even though we're not present in the body, that we're present in the mind, and we're present in the heart, and we're present in the spirit. And just honoring those people every day, every day. And I think it's a process. It takes years to get over having lost someone so dear and close to you. You just have to take it one day at a time, I think.
Mm. So it sounds, I like the two different approaches. Dr. Zimmerman talked about grace. And that's one thing, like how she's receiving grace, a kind word, kind actions from others, and how that is transformative in helping her process what's occurred. And then, Rodney, you're saying that ritual, memorializing this person's life and their existence, but doing it on a continual basis, to a reminder of who they are, speaking speaking as a way of keeping them alive, but also I think um, until you can let them go to a certain extent, or process the passing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it takes a while. I remember when my mom passed many years ago, and it would be 2 or 3 or 4 years later, and I would feel this kind of anxiety come over my body. And I would be like, what is this? And then I would remember, oh, I'm missing my mom today. I'm missing that person that was such an integral part of my life. And so then I would go and maybe light a candle or sit in the park and just commune with the times that we've had together. So I think it's so important to have that. And it's also important to have your friends and your family around you to just wrap their arms around you and let you know that it's okay. Because sometimes we don't know what to say to people who lose people who are so very close and dear to them. And then in those cases, just wrap your arms around the people and just let them know, I'm here, without really saying much. Just, kindness, like Dr. Zimmerman was saying.
It seems like that we've lost Dr. Zimmerman for a few moments, but we're going to go ahead and keep moving forward. Sue, are there any questions from the audience at this time? Yes, we have another question.
Yes, the role of diet is huge, in my opinion. Because what you put in your body is what you are. And one of the things, having been a restaurant owner, is that when I was working within the Bed-Stuy community, one of the things that I found important was removing preservatives from the diet, making food as real, and using food that is real and fresh, and that is has as few preservatives as possible. And I think that has a major impact on the mind and how the body functions. So, you know, we Americans, we have a lot of addictions around sugars and salts and those kinds of things. So I'm just adding like fresh vegetables into the diet if you don't do that normally, and fresh fruit. I think it's really important. Diet plays a major role in how we deal with things on a mental, emotional level.
I love that that question came and it mentions exercise and diet because yet again, we're talking about an integrative approach. And so we're trying to maintain our mental, spiritual, physical health. So holistic health. So we have and it looks like we have Dr. Zimmerman is back. Do you want to respond to the question, Dr. Zimmerman? Or would you like to respond to the next question? Okay, so maybe she's frozen.
I would like to add a little bit about the exercise piece. Initially, when we talked about having this talk, I wanted to really talk about movement. And then early on in our conversation, we talked about the importance of movement. Movement is really important in connecting the mind and the body. So that goes back to the question that we had posted when we talked about nutrition. Movement is also important. I see that as a very integral part of healing. But I also wanted to let people know about a little basic 4 movements that I've always practiced. There are 4 yogic movements that I run through, and it takes about 15 or 20 minutes to do if you decide you want to do it to that extent every day. And it really does help to integrate the mind and the body together. So I'm that, along with, you know, meditation and prayer, I think you have a winning combination.
Fantastic. I noticed that when I returned to New York, I am one who loves exercise and I have a significant fitness background. For a while, I lost the motivation. And like many others, I gained the Corona 20.
We all did.
And I realized when I saw the mirror, I said, "Oh, I need to try something different." So, and I've lost half of it, but there we have 10 more to go. But integrating, I noticed that even while it's snowing, if I go and walk, even I'm not a fan of this New York weather, but every single day, whether it's push-ups or jumping jacks, or
Creation.
okay, the exercise and eating right helped me feel better and elevated my mood and um, encouraged me. It was an encouragement to keep moving toward the next day or continue with this day and make it to the next day. Dr. Zimmerman? Okay. I think Sue says that we have another question. Okay. How do you deal with fatigue of COVID, virtual, and Zoom? Dr. Zimmerman, do you want to address that question? Okay.
Yes.
Dr. Zimmerman, we can't hear your audio. We can see you, but we can't hear you. Okay, so we're going to, while technology is improving, we're going to go ahead and, or while she's working on her technology, we're going to have Rodney answer the question.
Can you repeat the question?
The question was, how do you deal with COVID, virtual, and Zoom fatigue?
Oh, virtual and Zoom fatigue. Well, you balance that with doing other creative things as well. Me being a doctoral student, I'm having 3-hour classes at least a few times a week on Zoom and doing other business things as well. But just know when to disconnect from it. It's like anything. If we would be in our normal situation where we're going to work and you know that you're at work all day long, but maybe you should take that break for lunch and go and walk in the park. It's really no different from being in the office. I mean, I think if we are having to deal with most of our lives being on Zoom and dealing with virtual meetings throughout the day, you just have to say, I'm going to do self-care. I'm going to get up from the computer. If it's nothing but just go into your living room and do a series of stretches, this is where the 4 yogic steps would work well. Or having a time where you just go outside on your stoop or in your backyard and just take like a 15-minute breather or a 10-minute breather. It's really just that simple. It's just making a decision that I'm going to get up from, I'm going to take a break. And that's what's going to be able to, that's going to allow you to maintain the balance in your life, even in this new normal, quote unquote.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Did we get Dr. Zimmerman back?
Dr. Zimmerman? Are you back? Okay, so she's still frozen. So we did talk about how integrative approaches benefit our community. We talked about stretching. We talked about getting together with family and laughing and dancing. Even if we have to do this in an isolated place, if we have to do this virtually, but making the connection that deals with mind and body, or soul and mind, or soul and body, are definitely a benefit to our individual health. How can we use an integrative approach to benefit our community? Because we have previously kind of talked about what it is to do this for self-care. Mm-hmm. And I guess we can kind of imagine doing these things in concert or collectively, mm-hmm. Using technology. We can also do these things, I guess, outside and socially distanced. Mm-hmm. If you're not afraid of the cold like myself.
I don't like it either, Ryan.
So, I'm going to actually ask the next question. What are challenges to integrating self-care in our lives?
The biggest challenge usually is time, having more on our plates than time we have in the run of the day. For me, that's always the biggest challenge with creating and maintaining balance in my daily life. But I have to just kind of sit down, take a breath, look at my schedule, and make sure that I'm getting those moments in. And like sometimes at the end of a long, long day, cooking is meditation. Making sure that you prepare yourself a really nice meal, take a few really fresh ingredients, and you use that almost as, and it is a form of meditation, is cooking for yourself, taking a few ingredients and just turning it into something that is going to be sustenance for your body. I think that's so simple. And sometimes after you you make that, if you have someone that you're living with, sit down at dinner and just really, go over your day, talk about the highs and the lows of it. But I just think that dinner is so, so important, whether you're by yourself or you're with someone. Preparing that each night, it does wonders for me. I use it as meditation all the time.
I find it really interesting that you said time is a challenge, particularly because the way the Western construct of time, and seeing it in this way in which we're kind of losing it, or we prioritize other things, um, such as working, such as shopping, such as maybe television watching, things that are typical in a Western society. I've learned that I have to reprioritize and put myself at the top of the list and do that on a daily basis in order to put everything in its proper perspective. So, and that has become a method of self-care to say, oh, I'm more important than working at this moment. I need to take a break, or I need to take the day off because because I don't feel well, or I just need a mental health day. So I found that looking at time, looking at money, being able to reprioritize has allowed me to breathe and has allowed me to refresh myself, um, because I'm refreshing myself every single day. So I love the concept. When you mentioned time, I thought about capitalism and how it causes, how we focus so much on doing, producing for someone else, and how we need to step out of that and prioritize our humanity, especially as minoritized folks, Black, Brown, LGBTQIA+, etc. We must, because the messages, particularly during the previous political administration and on January 6th, these are messages to minoritized folks. These are negative messages. And so we must prioritize ourselves in order to counteract the many different kind of signals and messages that are coming from society at large. So thank you. Thank you. We are happy to have Dr. Zimmerman back. It's so unfortunate that we have technology issues. We see you, but we do. Oh, now I
Oh
think
my
we can hear
God.
you.
Oh, Dr. Zimmerman.
Now we can
Technology
hear you.
is wearing us out.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Hmm.
So we talked about, our last question was challenges to integrating self-care and how we overcome them. I'm gonna ask this last question, um, and then we'll take questions from our attendees. Um, we talked about, Dr. Zimmerman, you mentioned not being able to consistently go to church, not being able to go to church now, which is one of your most consistent um, communities. We talked about some of us not having family and being able to gather. So let's talk about self-care as a communal practice. And how do we engage in self-care? We can either relate it to our last question or not. We talked about Zoom. We talked about, are there any other ways we can use self-care in a communal way? And that's the thought behind that is if we're taking care of ourselves, and as marginalized folks, Black and brown folks, we usually have to take we subscribe to the it takes a village ideology or philosophy. So we're often helping not only ourselves, but those who are older than us, those who are younger than us, just those in our community. And it looks like Dr. Zimmerman, you would like to answer this question.
Well, I think aside from the fact that we have our social media platforms, I still think that there's
Dr. Zimmerman? Okay. Rodney, we're gonna toss this one to you. I think she's frozen.
She might try typing it in.
Okay. Dr. Zimmerman, would you try typing it into the chat? And then I'll just read it.
I'm just looking at my family composition and I'm saying, well, we have the young, and I
Oh, Dr. Zimmerman, it's spotty. So we heard a few words, but not the idea. Um, is it possible to respond in the chat? Okay. Rodney, we're gonna toss you the question and maybe she can type it in or come back in the room.
Would you mind repeating the question?
Sure. How do we engage in self-care as a communal practice? We talked about taking care of ourselves, and there may be others who aren't familiar with self-care. They may, so we do this, we've talked about doing this individually. How do we do self-care as a communal practice? Particularly because Black and brown folks, LGBT folks, we work together as a village. And so we take care of each other.
Well, I think in a time of COVID, technology is going to have to play a very major role in us being communal. That's unfortunate, and in some ways it is fortunate. In the ways that it is fortunate, I think that it gives us an opportunity to gather more people together on, social media platform like a Zoom meeting or a FaceTime or, a chat room on Facebook, that we're able to maybe come together and do a daily meditation. Is one thing that we could do as a community together. We schedule them maybe once or twice a week where we come together and we have either a meditation or we do a like a movement together. We prescribe what that music is going to be. Everybody plays that music at the same time, and then you just videotape each other dancing. These are the kind of things that we can do to kind of move the conversation along in terms of engaging the community in this new normal. Prayer and meditation is so important in terms of maintaining balance in our lives, whether we're in the new normal or whether we're in our normal lives. This should be always a major asset that we use to maintain that balance. And I think that social media gives us an opportunity to even do that on a vast scale. So I would think that's one way of actually using the situation for what it is, but also getting out of it what we need. If it's not one person, call your friend up and maybe you do once a week where you actually have a prayer conference together where you're praying for each other and upholding each other in that way. You could do this with several people of your friends and your family. One of the things that I've been engaging in lately since COVID hit is virtual birthdays. That concept can be applied to almost anything. You know, if we can have a virtual birthday, we can have a virtual prayer service. We can have a virtual meditation. We can have a virtual movement party. So those are ways I think that we can use the technology in positive ways to engage our community.
Thank you. So you actually talking about engaging technology reminded me of something. I speak to my nieces and nephews weekly, and they get on Nintendo, they get on PlayStation, and you're actually able to play online and play games together. And then I thought, well, a good friend of mine from Union, Danielle, we talked about watching a movie together online. So I'm just recalling some experiences that say, you know, technology can be leveraged that's way beyond simply Zoom, simply um, um, Facebook Messenger. There are different um, modalities that allow us to engage with each other in different ways that are fun. Beyond the typical conversation and seeing each other. You know, I'm learning how to TikTok. I video chat and I make video recordings for my families, and then I've also been kind of taking photos. So thank you for reminding me that that's a way to stay engaged, whether it's live, whether it's recording. Sometimes I know I just have a longing to see a person, and to see them live is fantastic, but also I'm just as satisfied if they send me a recorded message, a video message. So yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
We have come to the end of the hour, and I just want to thank I'd like to first of all thank our two esteemed speakers, Dr. Paulette Zimmerman and Reverend Rodney Hughes. And I would also like to thank FLoAD, LGBT Faith Leaders of African Descent, for having the foresight and the sight to have these conversations specifically to uplift, to encourage, to inform the LGBT community, specifically for Black and Brown marginalized voices. And I would like to remind you that the third Thursday of each month, at least for the next quarter, we plan to have and continue these conversations. The next one should be on March the 18th. I would like to ask you, Rodney, if you would like to close with a final saying, a final word, any final word to our community.
Always remember that God is with us and God is within us. And that is the twin power that we possess, given whatever circumstances that we find ourselves in. And if we always remember that God is within us and God is with us, then I think that is the beginning point. That is really the ground zero for having mental health and spiritual health.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to leave a final word that continue to have grace for yourself. That's an act of self-love. That's an act of self-care. Continue to have grace for your community, LGBT, Black and Brown folks, because we are particularly experiencing significant hardship during the global pandemic, those who are marginalized. So grace goes so far, and particularly in New York, we're used to kind of having quick and harsh responses. Let's slow it down. Be graceful to yourself, be graceful to others, and that will help us. That is an act of self-care. So thank you for joining us today, and please come back and join us next month. Peace and blessings.